Hopefully that was good, John. John started as a real estate investor in short-term rentals in 2008. He has a $5 million portfolio of short-term rentals in New Jersey and Florida. He also received his real estate license in Pennsylvania and in New Jersey. He's a former CFO and a licensed CPA, and he is the current treasurer for BCAR. So he's a busy, busy, busy person. And John, you didn't say, he's also teaches and created a class at Archbishop Wood on real estate. He can tell you more about that, but that's a great thing.
Yeah, do that in my spare time.
And we're also pleased to have one of our affiliate members, David Sulak from Current Environmental. David's going to give a brief description of his business to our members. David is the managing director of Current Environmental, which is an environmental consulting and contracting corporation. And David, once you're done, John, I'll just give you the thumbs up to go ahead. So
yep, sounds good.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, David.
All right, I can speak now.
Yes.
Thumbs up. My name's David Sulak. I'm with Current Environmental. We do teach classes. You may have sat through one of my boring classes. They're all environmental. We're environmental consultants, contractors, which mean we give advice. You have questions, we could probably answer them or refer you to someone who could. We've been around since the 90s. Mold, lead, tank sweeps, environmental due diligence, nothing really exciting, nothing you probably really want in your transaction because it could screw it up. But the way the laws are in the United States, whoever owns the property owns the problem. It's completely not fair. But if I have a contaminated property, I don't tell you about it, and I disappear to Aruba and you buy my property and I'll investigate it, you would buy that problem. Pennsylvania can mandate cleanup of sites. New Jersey is voluntary, as is Delaware. That's about it. That's all. He has a hard stop at 1 o'clock, so I think this is going to be kind of an interesting class.
Well, thank you, David. And David is on our website as one of our affiliates, and it's Current Environmental. And we do appreciate your support, David.
Yeah, fun.
All right. Well, John, go ahead. I'm going to mute.
Okay. All right. Well, good afternoon, everybody. I appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedules and jumping on the Zoom hour here. When they asked me to speak about short-term rentals, the first thing that came to my mind is, how am I going to fit in all the subject matter within an hour? Any of you that are involved in short-term rentals or stay in the short-term rental or kind of looked into a short-term rental, know there's a lot involved with it. So I'm going to try to, on this call, kind of focus on the basics, what you probably want to know if you're going to work with real estate investors that are looking to buy in and get a short-term rental, what you want to know if you're going to be managing a short-term rental, for investors or maybe for yourself. And then, finally, what are the guests, and probably most important, what are they looking for when they sign up and they schedule a stay, from a short-term rental standpoint. As Lisa said, I got involved in this first as a real estate investor before I got my license. So I always tell people I have maybe a little bit different view on things because I come at things first as an investor and second as a realtor. So sometimes I'm able to provide some additional insights that may not, jump out at you, at first blush, just having your real estate license. I'd like to say, I got involved in short-term rentals when it wasn't cool to be involved in short-term rentals. Nowadays, it's the buzz and the rage, and everybody seems to, want to either stay at one for a staycation or buy one, and make some money on the side or what have you. But the main reason I got involved in short-term rentals is, I got to a point where retirement, was within 15, 20 years. And I was looking for opportunities where I could actually buy some investments, put some money to work, and then hopefully generate enough of a cash flow and appreciation that when it came time to retire, I would have that and be able to retire nicely. So it was a good quote unquote retirement plan for me. I highly recommend, if you are a realtor, and particularly if you're just getting started out, look at short-term rentals and look at real estate investing in general. because it really can supplement your income, not only, throughout your career, but definitely in retirement as well. So, like I said, what I'm going to cover is basically the basics of short-term rentals, talk about some of the benefits, if you went out there and you actually got one yourself, owning a short-term rental, what do investors expect? Because there's a whole market being developed now that they're looking towards, realtors and/or hosts to be able to manage these short-term rentals for investors. They don't want to get, involved. They're down in the nitty-gritty. So there's a great opportunity to kind of, either have like a side hustle where you make some extra money doing that, or some people have developed it, into an actual full-time career, and that's all they do. So we're talking about, meeting, expectations of investors. We talked about, what guests are going to expect, and then get into managing the actual, day in, day out of short-term rentals. All right, so what are the basics? I mean, first off, you have to understand, generally speaking, a short-term rental is defined as anybody that's looking to rent a place, 30 days, or actually less than 30 days. Different areas define short-term rentals a little bit different, but generally speaking, that's kind of the threshold. It could be as little as a night or two, a long weekend, a week's vacation over the summer down the shore, or it could be somebody, and what we're seeing a lot now, particularly down in Florida, is people are moving down there and having main primary residence or retirement homes built, that in the interim, because of the demand down there, they need a place to stay. So we're getting a lot of bookings, from folks that, hey, my construction house, isn't going to be done for another month and a half. I want to stay in a place that feels like home and has all the essentials of home. The current market trends, it's interesting because I've watched this industry kind of evolve over the years. From when I got started, there was no Airbnb or VRBO, and the only way that I got bookings was through the traditional method, going through a real estate company and them showing your house and signing a lease and what have you. Or what I actually chose to do, because I didn't have my license at that point in time, I actually put it on Craigslist, and got a lot of my bookings from Craigslist. But the good news was I was getting bookings. The bad news was nothing was automated. So I had to handle, doing all the leases, mailing out the leases, making sure you get them back signed, getting the deposits back, and it was a nightmare. And then lo and behold, Airbnb, just got started, and VRBO was out there, but really hadn't, taken, full root at that point in time. And their business models were basically looking to capitalize on the evolving short-term rental market, but to really make it a marketplace where not only people that had investments in short-term rental could actually put their listing up there and market it and get, more people seeing it, more eyeballs, on it to increase the bookings, but at the same point in time, allow a system to be able to manage that on the back end once the bookings, were secured. You have the people that were actually going out there and got used to, in the past, staying in hotel rooms, and for whatever reasons, and there was various reasons, they were like, you know what, if I had an opportunity to not stay in a hotel room, but visit the same area and could stay in something, a little bit bigger with maybe some family, some friends, and we could share more time together, in a house or in a space, they would prefer that versus just, everybody getting hotel rooms or what have you. So the market started to evolve, based on that. And today, the trends are, in addition to the family vacations, the whole market and what they call staycations or stay vacations kind of evolved coming out of COVID-19, where a lot of people were working from home, and either in the interim or longer term, we're going to be working from home. And their bosses were saying, hey, as long as you get the job done, you're getting your work done, I don't require you to be any particular place. So lo and behold, people are like, wow, I can, book a short-term rental, go out to Colorado in the wintertime, do some skiing at the same point in time, be able to get my work done during the day, and life's good. Same thing, down in Florida, and you get down there, when the snowbirds are down there, take advantage of the nice weather, and at the same point in time, still get my work done and, be able to take care of my job requirements. So staycations became very popular. Weddings and events, instead of, once again, staying at hotels, having weddings and events, that, they would rent like 2 or 3 houses and everybody would come down, became very big. Corporate travel. At first, when I first got into it, corporations were leery of booking, these houses, because they didn't want, their employees showing up and nobody be there to let them in, or maybe it's a bogus, rental, what have you. But now I'm seeing more and more, corporations actually, booking these places on behalf of their employees as well. So it's an emerging, market. There's all different facets to it. And one of the reasons is attracting a lot of folks, and maybe some of you folks to want to learn more about it. In addition to the positive things that it's attracting, it's also attracting, from a legal standpoint and from a township standpoint, a lot of what I call rental restrictions, or different towns wanting to manage the short-term rental market. So the first thing you want to do before you actually buy a property or get involved in managing one for somebody is you want to make sure you understand, what is allowed, within that township, if there's any taxes that you have to collect, as far as state taxes and what have you, and just overall know the ins and the outs. Because the last thing you want to do is start managing a property and mismanaging it because you don't know the regulations, or worse yet, you buy one for yourself thinking you're going to get a certain amount of cash flow, and then they come in one day and shut you down, and now you still got to, meet the monthly mortgage payment, but you don't have, any cash flow coming in anymore. Operations, considerations. If you're going to get involved in this and managing it for somebody else or doing it yourself as an investor, you need to have a team around you to be able to do this well. You're going to need your cleaner. Your cleaner is going to be your best friend and your most reliable asset involved in this. Particularly if you're going to have, short-term rentals that you can't just hop in a car and be there, within a half hour, an hour. If you're going to invest, down to Florida or even down the Jersey Shore, you're not going to be able to, run down there every time there's an issue. And if you have a good cleaning crew and team and you treat them well, they're your first line of defense as far as dealing with things or seeing things as they come up. Risk and challenges. When I first got involved in this, and I'll talk more on the next page about, how I looked at it from an investment and how I kind of had like a baseline case to make sure I wasn't getting in over my head. But I call it, protecting, the downside, but giving you the option to really, make money on the upside. I'll speak to that in a minute. But the one thing that I was a little naive about, but now I'm not, is, things coming from left field that you cannot control, i.e. COVID-19. We all experienced it from a real estate realtor standpoint when we couldn't go out there and show houses, have open houses, made it difficult, with closings, and we all felt that. And we had a period of time where we couldn't do anything at all. We were totally shut down. Well, that impacted the short-term rental market as well. And to a certain extent, in some markets, even longer than when, real estate in general, as far as listings and, buyers, being able to get into houses and stuff lasted. Some of these short-term bans, they shut you down for a good period of time. And it just, lined up where the beginning of it for me down in New Jersey impacted my cash flow that year, because I missed, some main weeks of being able to do the summer rentals, because of the shutdowns. So you just got to, kind of have a mindset that you're looking around the corners, expect the unexpected, and don't lever yourself too much where, if something does come from left field, you can't navigate through it and sustain yourself in order, for that to get resolved and move forward. Best practices I'm going to talk about on another slide, so I won't get into that. The future of short-term rentals. Short-term rentals is gaining even more and more traction for several reasons. A lot of what I just mentioned, but my opinion of where it's going to go, I think it's going to really be guided by not only the folks that are in the industry right now, but the folks that get into the industry as far as buying investment properties or managing them, and then how we collectively navigate through the new regulations and restrictions, as well as the new opportunities. And if we do a good job with that, I think the short-term rental market is going to continue to grow and get better and better. If we collectively don't do a good job with that, then I think, it's going to get additional, eyeballs on it and people, getting involved in it that we may not want them involved, and basically lessening the amount of money you can make with short-term rentals, or at the very least, creating more red tape and aggravation as you're trying to make money with one, or you're trying to manage one. So it'll be interesting to see, I think we're at a pivotal point, what direction, the whole industry goes in as far as short-term rentals. All right, so what are the benefits, and how did I kind of look at it as far as, trying to get involved in it? I always looked at it from a total return standpoint, but I prioritized in my mind, these four levers or criteria that make up the total return. So before I get into each one and talk about it, the first thing that I would tell you is before you even look to buy, if you're going to be an investor and buy a short-term rental, you have to ask yourself the question, like, why do I want to do this, and have an answer for the short term, the midterm, and the long term, because you need to kind of lay out a plan as to what your goals are, and to manage it and coordinate, particularly when it comes to the financial side of things, to be able to execute on that plan. I see sometimes, particularly new investors, they get caught up in the buzz of, everybody has a short-term rental. I'm a realtor and I'm in real estate, so I'm going to go out and get me one as well. But they don't take time before they pull that trigger to really understand just why they're getting involved in it and what they're looking to get out of it. And that answer may be different for, if there's 30 plus people on the call, there may be 30 different answers, and you're the only one that can answer that. But I highly recommend that you take a step back and you look at that and you ask yourself those questions and get some clarity and some answers to them, and then lay out a plan as to how you're going to go about it. Because otherwise it's like you're going to the casino, you're just out there, hey, I got a boatload of money, I'm going to throw it down on red or black and see what happens. And that's no way to manage, a business and or an investment. So from a total return standpoint, for me, as I mentioned, the ultimate goal was longer term. I wanted to, have a portfolio that I could retire comfortably and not have to continue, working for a living. And if I could retire sooner than the retirement age, all the better. But I definitely wanted to make sure when I reached retirement age that I was comfortable and had enough cash flow and assets at that point. So I looked at, there's four things here. We have rental income, which I define as really cash flow, the pay down of the debt or the servicing of the debt, tax advantages that you get, with short-term rentals, and appreciation. For me, when I took a step back and I said, okay, well, in what order of importance are they for me? I came up with the following. So for me, appreciation was the number one thing I was looking for, because I was taking a more longer term horizon where, I wanted to build up my asset portfolio to be at a point where, that appreciation, I could either, pull it out if I needed to in retirement. I could use it to buy other properties and leverage that to get even more cash flow. But at the end of the day, I viewed appreciation. So that's why I chose the Jersey Shore market. And that's why I chose, the vacation homes down in Florida. So for me, I saw, and my investments in New Jersey Shore and Brigantine. So, I saw a lot more potential in Brigantine than some of the other markets, only because the other markets had escalated from a pricing standpoint a lot more than Brigantine at that point. And then the same thing down in Florida. I wanted to, since I had other income coming in, it was important to me, to really understand and get, the benefits of the tax advantages from a depreciation standpoint, not only to defer, the tax impact on my rental cash flow that was coming in, but being involved as a full-time realtor and real estate professional, I was able to take advantage of some other tax benefits that are out there as well. So tax advantages was number two. The pay down of the debt was nice because every time there was a mortgage payment, I was getting paid, my debt was going down, so my net equity was going up. And as long as I was able to keep making that mortgage payment, I was basically socking away money via somebody else paying my mortgage to be able to have a nice retirement plan. And then the final thing that I took a look at, I wasn't so concerned with cash flow, but I need to have the cash flow enough where I wasn't going to have to be reaching into my pocket, to cover, net negative cash flow in order to produce the other three benefits or returns. So I laid out what I call like a base case or baseline case and said, okay, based on these amount of rental days and this occupancy percentage and vacancy at these rates, what cash flow do I need in order to give me just enough to be able to pay the monthly mortgage, nut every month, and then also to be able to take care of expenses and put away a little for CapEx. So I would highly recommend that you have a base case cash flow and then like an upside cash flow. And if you do that and you use reasonable assumptions and you can buy the property correctly and well, you should be able to have the basis of a good investment. And then all those other three things kind of kick in and add to the total return. So that's how I looked at it from, an investment standpoint and what was my strategy getting into it. Flexibility. This is great, particularly, with folks being realtors. We have a flexible schedule where we don't have, a job that we have to be at, 9 to 5. And, although we work, more than 9 to 5 or we work weekends and stuff like that, we do have flexibility to be able to go where we want, to work from, to be able to take some time off, manage our vacations and stuff like that. So short-term, rental investments, not only was a good investment, but allowed me to take advantage and have some flexibility to be able to go places that I wanted to see and wanted to stay at, in addition to making some money. Diversification. That's why I started looking out at Florida in addition to New Jersey, because I didn't want to have all my eggs in one basket in one market. Because God forbid, somebody would come in and all of a sudden they put in all these regulations in the Jersey Shore market against short-term rentals. That's where I had all my properties. Then I would have been dead in the water. So, from a risk management standpoint, I chose to diversify and start looking to get some properties in Florida as well. And I mentioned personal enjoyment, being able to go to nice places, stay in quote unquote your own place and see, parts of the country that you really wanted to try to see and enjoy, as a real benefit as well. So what do investors expect? So if you're, and this slide is more, if you're going to be managing short-term rentals, for investors, if you're going to work with investors as a realtor to find and buy good short-term rental investments, or yourself, if you're going to be the investor and you're going to manage your own properties, what do all those folks expect, both in the beginning and longer term? So the first thing is they're going to expect that you'll manage this property either for yourself or for them, to generate a positive cash flow. Nobody in particular, unless they have deep pockets and they can sustain going negative with cash flow, nobody really wants to month after month be negative cash flow, even if the appreciation longer term is pretty good. They at least want to break even with cash flow and then enjoy the upside, with the appreciation. So if you're going to manage, a property for investors or for yourself, you really got to get into the nuts and bolts as far as laying out a budget and understanding, based on occupancy rates and rates per night, what revenues you're going to be bringing in, how that cycle of revenue is going to occur, and it's not going to be like a straight line, you get the same amount. I'm going to obviously make more money, down in New Jersey in the rentals during the summer than I am during the winter, and vice versa in Florida. So you need to understand that flow, and then you really got to get down to nitty gritty and understand your expenses. So you make sure your net cash flow positive. As far as high occupancy rates, everybody, if you ask them, well, how often you want to rent out your place, the answer is going to be, well, every night of the year. The first thing you got to realize with short-term rentals, it's not like an annual rental where you put somebody in there and they're in there day after day and you're getting that monthly check. There's going to be, some vacancies or times of the year or days of the week even where you're not going to be able to rent the property for several reasons. But once again, and there's a lot of analytics that are out there right now in particular markets that you can get your hands on and kind of wrap your head around making some assumptions on these numbers to be able to help guide you with, laying out a plan. So you want to make sure you're managing it, that you don't overprice it. So your occupancy rates are on the lower side, but you don't underprice it where you got it booked, every day, every week, but you're really not, making any money off it. In fact, sometimes you're negative, when it comes to cash flow. Investors also expect a strong rental demand. They wouldn't be, buying, property in that area if they really didn't anticipate that the rental demand is going to be there. So if you're working with an investor who's looking to buy an investment property, say like down in Florida, Fort Lauderdale or on the West Coast, what have you, you really need to understand that market, and you really need to understand, how you make money in the short-term rental market in those areas, because there's nuances once you get into the detail that really separate the properties that really do well in a market and the ones that really don't do as well or not so much. And if you as the expert, we're going to be managing a property in an area, they expect you to know that. Good guest experiences. This is the key to longer term, having one of the better short-term rentals out there, because you're only going to be as good and you're only going to be able to market yourself as well as the guests think you are good and think your property is a nice property to rent. So a lot of the criteria and the algorithms, when it comes to these search engines, when people go in and say, hey, I'm looking for this week in this marketplace, at these rates, show me the ones that come up. A portion of that is driven, and sometimes a greater portion is driven based on, the reviews that you get from your guest. So I'll go into in a minute, what the expectations are from guests. But you really need to understand that, and we understand as realtors, the customer service and our name and our brand is everything. But when it comes to short-term rentals, it's even of more importance, because that's how people are going to check you out online and decide whether or not they want to stay at your house based on what other people have said that have stayed at your house. And the final thing investors expect is they expect that the regulations in the marketplace, and they're not going to come up with a big tax bill that you didn't collect taxes on, or have somebody come in and shut down the whole property because you're doing something that you're not allowed to do based on the local ordinance. What do guests expect? Well, first and foremost, and some of this stuff is like straightforward, but sometimes the obvious is not so obvious. They expect it to be clean. They don't expect to come in and find, wrappers underneath the bed. They don't expect to come in and find like one of the trash cans not empty by the cleaner that has stuff in it. They don't expect to come in and find dirty dishes in the dishwasher, that nobody ran and nobody, opened it up before the new guest came in to run them and clean them. So they expect overall cleanliness, and they treat it like they want the extra space and all the benefits that a house brings, but they expect the cleanliness and all the things that they would get staying at a hotel or a resort as well. So you really got to put your cap on and think, hey, what are a lot of the things that they offer at the hotel? Need to make sure we're offering them, and then maybe some additional things, particularly from a cleanliness standpoint. They expect the accurate representation. Once again, when you put this listing out on the marketplace and there's all the amenities that you got to go into and list, and restaurants and how far it's from the beach and all that stuff, they expect all that stuff to be accurate, because that's what they're basing that in the reviews. They're basing and making a decision whether they want to rent that or not. So if you have something in there that isn't an accurate representation, and I'll give you an example. Sometimes people take pictures of their property and they have it out there. The pictures look nice. However, they were the pictures from 3-4 years ago, and now all of a sudden I have a different bed in there, or I had to swap out the couches because the one couch broke or whatever. And the people come in and it's not what they saw online. You would think, well, there's couches there. What's the big deal? Well, it's not maybe the type of couch or the leather couch that they were expecting. Maybe it's a different brand of couch, and for whatever reason, they don't like those couches. So you just got to make sure you're constantly updating your listing online and making sure it fairly represents everything that listing has and currently has. Guests expect responsiveness. It's not like when you're doing like an annual rental and somebody calls you where the dryer isn't working, you're like, okay, yeah, I'll call somebody and I can get them out there as quickly as possible. Maybe the guy doesn't show up, or you can't get somebody out there for 3 or 4 days. Short-term rentals, if they're only there for 3 or 4 days and they only packed enough clothes, to last them for a day or two because they knew that there was a washer and dryer in there, you better have a contractor that can get out there ASAP and get that dryer working, or you're going to have some issues. So they expect responsiveness. They expect to be able to get a hold of you when they have an issue, and they expect a resolution to the issue once they get a hold of you. Privacy. They expect that when they're living in your house, it's not your house for the time that they're living in it. It's their house. So, so some people think, well, I want to make sure that, somebody's not doing something they're not supposed to be doing, smoking or doing this or that. And they'll put, cameras and different things in the house to kind of quote unquote spy on the people when they're there. A lot of locations that's not legal, number one. And number two, even if it was, if the guest wasn't aware of that, and all of a sudden, like, you call them on something and they ask, well, how did you know that? And look, oh yeah, we had the camera in the bedroom that showed you doing X, Y, and Z. That's a disaster if and when that would happen. So just err on the side of, for the week or the long weekend or the month, whatever they're going to be there, that, it's okay to have a Ring camera outside, but cameras inside, I would highly recommend against it. It's going to drive you nuts, number one, because you're constantly going to be reviewing the camera. And number two, you may unintentionally be violating some privacy issues. And then the final two, they expect comfort and a good value for their money. How to manage a short-term rental. First off, you you want to set clear expectations with, if you're going to be managing this for an investor, what you're going to do, what they're going to do, and who's going to do what as far as working with contractors and getting things addressed. So if you don't set that expectation up front, there's going to be finger pointing or situations where you thought the owner was going to follow up and get that addressed, whereas he was looking to you, to run, the interference on that and get somebody out there to get it addressed. So set clear expectations, roles and responsibilities. If you're going to be a full management company and you're going to manage it for somebody else, understand, lay out all those things line item by line item that you're going to manage. Or if you're just going to handle and be like a host on the front end, but then when there's issues and problems or things break or what have you, you're going to throw it back to the owner to do it. Lay that out so everybody is on the same page as to who's going to do what. Like I said, Airbnb and VRBO are the main websites that a lot of the folks in the traffic go to. You have to maintain the property if it's a short-term rental. It's great when the cash flow is coming in and the good times are rolling and you see, the money, increasing in your bank account. But if you're not putting a certain amount aside for ordinary repairs and maintenance and/or capital investments, that you're going to need to do, then your property is going to get devalued over time, and you'll find out you don't get as many bookings, going forward that maybe you did in the past. You got to do a great job marketing the property and social medias. And social media is all different ways to get your property out there and get exposure nowadays. But if you're managing a short-term rental, in addition to Airbnb and VRBO, real estate investors, want to know what else you're going to be doing, to get their property out there. They expect, if you're managing it for somebody else, that you're on top of the market when it comes to pricing. The pricing changes based on the demand of the market and the supply. So it's not just, hey, set it at one price for the year and forget about it. You have to do like a weekly review of pricing to make sure you're pricing correctly in the market in order to be able to get the highest occupancy rate.
We do have a question. Sorry to
Yep.
interrupt, but
Yeah,
it's
go ahead.
about this topic. What
Yep.
tools do you use to come up with the rates?
So what I use, and one of the sites that's out there is, so I do all my bookings on VRBO and Airbnb. So each site has their own, what they call market data or price recommendations that you can go out there and see where your nightly price fits in with the other, what they call comparables in that market, so similar properties to you. And then they also show, hey, here's the rate at, on average, the properties are booking at, and then how your nightly rate compares to that. So I first and foremost, go onto the site and look at those things. And if there's opportunities for me to, take advantage and maybe, boost my price up because it's a high demand period and I still haven't booked, but maybe a lot of the other ones have, I'll take the prices up. Or, if we're getting close, to that time period and I need to make sure I'm going to get it booked, I may discount it to the market. But all that's out there on those sites. There's another thing out there if you want to pay a small fee and invest to get this. It's called AirDNA, which is basically taking all the information from all the Airbnb properties, and based on your location and in that marketplace, it gives you it's like data on steroids. I mean, you look at it all different ways. So they'd be some of the ones that I would recommend. What I also do from time to time too is I get to know some of the other short-term rental owners in the market, and I'll call them and just kind of unofficially get feedback from them. Hey, how's bookings going? You able to get more than you got last year? So there's nothing like knowing other people in the market and building those relationships as well.
have one other question, if that's okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
It kind of relates back to what you were talking to, but I don't know if you can answer this, but what occupancy percentage do you feel is realistic?
So for me, in my properties, from an overall standpoint, if I'm getting close to a 60% occupancy, and with a 60% overall, but 95 plus in what I'll call the main weeks or the main areas. So like in the summer, I basically want 100% occupancy from probably mid-June, when the kids are getting out of school, through probably Labor Day weekend, if not the weekend before, because a lot of the kids go back to school prior to Labor Day now. So that last week leading up to Labor Day weekend, sometimes you can't book, or you can't book at a high enough rate. So, but in the off season down Brigantine, one of the reasons I really like Brigantine is I get more year-round rentals down there, because you have the casinos, close by, and people go down there, for sports. If there's NCAA tournament, cheerleading contests they have down there in the winter months. So, I'll look to get at least, 2 long weekends booked a month, if not 3. If I get 4, it's a home run, but I want at least 2 or 3 of those weekends in the off season, booked as well. If I get and one of the trends that really started happening after COVID is I used to not get any like rentals like during the week in the off season, but now more and more, since people can work at home, I'll get somebody that'll rent it, Monday to Friday, because they like being down the shore in early November when nobody's around. They like walking on the beach. They can take their dog on the beach. Nobody bothers them. So that's. But overall, coming back to at the end of the day, if I'm about 60% to 65%, I'm happy. But I want to make sure I'm capturing that core time period. Does that answer your question?
That's it for questions right now.
Okay. All right. So as far as managing the short-term rentals, pretty much covered all this. I want to get to some of the other stuff and then leave time for additional questions and what have you. So this is something I get asked all the time, where people are looking to manage it as like a host. And what I mean by host, like if you have the property on Airbnb, you can actually be a host of that property without actually being the property owner. So you can manage the property for somebody else as a host, and you actually get a rating as a host versus, the property itself, for how well you're performing. So one of the more popular things that's happening, particularly with all these short-term rentals, cropping up and more people get involved in it, is there's people carving out a side hustle where they're just basically, they may not own short-term rentals, but they're actually a host that host and set things up on Airbnb and manage the bookings, on the front end as a host for these real estate investors. And then, once the people are in there and they're staying there, if there's issues that come up, then, the owner or a property manager handles, the back end. So I put this together. So if you're just partially managing things on the front end, meaning setting the prices, competitive rates, making sure you're marketing and getting the property out there, and you're keeping an eye and managing that occupancy, rate, then typically, depending on the market, I've seen as cheap as 8%, on the rent, being charged, all the way up to 15%. So, I tell people, particularly realtors, like if you don't have the money right now to actually buy one yourself, and you want to kind of dip your toe into the short-term rentals and kind of get familiar with it and kind of make some money, even though you don't have a property itself, this may be a good way to get started. You can start and be a host. and really get really good at that. And then when you make some money or save up some money and you can buy your first property, you're miles ahead because you already know the front end and how to manage those. If it's a full service, meaning you're not only handling like the front end of the bookings and everything, you're the people that make sure they have the welcome guide and they have the information when they're coming in and checking in to the house. You're the one that, hey, if the HVAC goes out at 12 o'clock on a winter's night, that you get the call versus the homeowner, or if there's issues with the cleaning, you're getting the call. So if you're doing like a full property management of that, on a lower side, it's at least 15%, and depending on the market, it could be as high as 30%. I've talked to some people in some markets where they get 30%, and that's pretty good money, particularly if you have a number of properties under management. So those rates vary depending on the market and obviously the services that you're going to offer. But once again, if you're looking to get involved in this, pick up the phone, talk to people that are in that marketplace, particularly realtors. We're always networking with other realtors. You're gonna come across realtors that do this, in those vacation spots that you're looking to buy or looking to start managing properties, and just pick their brain. They're usually very helpful and very willing to kind of guide you with some of the information to get you up and running. So that's management fees if you're looking to get involved in that. Okay, so in closing it out, and then we'll take some questions. So the appendix, I just listed 3 different things because these are kind of things you can reference and kind of go without saying, but I'll just hit them real quick. So if you're going to have a beach house and that's going to be a short-term rental and that's going to be your focus, to have a house that's close to a beach or what have you, there's certain expectations. If you're gonna have that as an investor, you're gonna manage that. So and these are in no particular order. These are just things that I threw out there. But proximity to the beach, there's a big difference between beach block and 2 houses in on the beach block. If you can advertise beach block, you really, and/or beachfront, you really command a higher premium than if you're just like a block away or a block and a half away. So don't underestimate that as an amenity. And if you can get views from that house as well, all the better. So if you're looking to buy an investment property, maybe start out, if you can afford, on that beach block and ones that have views. People love huge main living room areas where they can all congregate and hang out, particularly if there's going to be multiple families renting the same house, if it's big enough. They want the outdoor grills, to be able to grill because they bring all their food. If there's an outdoor shower that's enclosed, that's a real benefit. Air conditioning, you see a lot of these properties now that are built 3 stories up, particularly down the shore. And the newer properties already have this, because they built this in, but some of the older ones, they don't. And what I mean is they expect like 2-tier air conditioning. So, maybe great, you have a property 2 or 3 stories up and you get great views, but, if it's like 90+ degrees, because the air conditioning, is not 2-tiered system, and you got all the hot air rising, then they're not going to be comfortable with that. Some of the other things, people working from home, they expect a high-speed Wi-Fi, so they can get on Zoom calls like this or be able to do the work there. Beach gear, all this stuff that I'm outlining here, if you think about it, particularly down the Jersey Shore, people are trying to figure out, when I go down there, I only got so much room in my car. So the more things that you're going to want to enjoy and need down the shore that you can offer in your house, and they don't have to bring, gives you a leg up on the competition. So don't underestimate, like beach chairs, wagons, beach tags, toys for the kids, and all that stuff. And then the final one there to point out is the parking. Yeah, and we all know this, particularly if you have investment properties in Ocean City or Seal, parking is a premium. So if you have driveway parking or multiple cars can get in a driveway, or better yet, garage parking, play that up, because that's something that really has value in your short-term rentals. 10 complaints of guests, the most common ones. Number one on the list is cleanliness. People hate going in and staying at a place that's not clean. Noise, and you got to be careful when you have side-by-side duplexes, and some of my properties are side-by-side duplexes. You got to make sure that you have expectations, on both sides as far as what they can do outside on the decks versus when they have to take the noise inside, certain times of the day after 10 o'clock or what have you. Because if you don't do that, you're going to constantly have the one guest on the one side complain about the guests on the other side, and you'll have both of them kind of, having a food fight back and forth, complain about the noise. So noise is a big one. Communication, we talked about, you got to make sure you're available when there's an issue. Hidden fees, and the websites do a better job of this now. But what people hated about Airbnb and VRBO early on is you would advertise, hey, here's my nightly rate, say $300 or $400 a night, and then a cleaning fee of like $200. So people would be doing the math and figure, oh yeah, that fits in my budget. And then when they hit the book, it tacks on all the service fees that VRBO or Airbnb charge. It tax on the state taxes that are due, tax on a service fee that comes out of the investor's pocket. So at the end of the day, it winds up costing a lot more than what they thought it was going to cost. So like I said, these sites have done a better job of kind of disclosing that on the front end. So before people book it, they understand it. But err on the side of being open and honest with all these things. If you're going to charge a pet fee, make sure you call it out specifically and you say, yeah, there is a pet fee, versus, hey, I allow pets, but you don't say whether there's a fee or not. And then you go ahead and you charge them a pet fee when you didn't state it on the front end. So just stuff like that. And then the final thing is making sure the accuracy of the listing is correct. The latest trends, I touched on some of these, longer stays, staycations, Airbnb arbitrage. This is something that is really, particularly with the younger generation folks, they look at the Airbnb arbitrage where they may not be able to buy the property, as a short-term rental themselves. But what they do, what Airbnb arbitrage is, they'll go in and look for properties that they can rent themselves, but don't have restrictions within that lease that prevent them from turning around and subletting that as a short-term rental. So this is one of these things that's just evolving now. And some of the real estate investors that rent it, year round may not have in their lease, that it excludes being able to do this or be able to, sublet as short-term rentals. So on the one hand, if you're an investor and you're managing, a property that's an annual one, you want to make sure that the person that rents it can't turn around and sublet it as a short-term rental. And then number two, if you want it, once again, this is another way of getting involved in short-term rentals where you may not be able to buy a place yourself, but if you can find a property that you can pay, an annual monthly fee, but then turn around and sublet it at a short-term interest nightly fee, net when you put the two cash flows together, you may be dollars, several $1,000s ahead. And then the final one is the hosting side hustle. I see more and more people getting involved, in hosting versus owning the property and managing that to make some money on the side. So in summary, I would say, short-term rentals, it's been great. I really enjoy it. I really enjoy the people that I meet, and I really enjoy the profitability and the cash flows from it. But if you're going to do it, get educated, It is a little bit different than, in some cases, a lot different than annual rentals. And make sure if you do it, you're thoughtful about it, you have a plan, and you know what you're getting yourself into so you can manage and execute it well and have a really good investment for yourself. So that's all I had.
Thank you, John. I don't see any other questions in the chat. Scott Geller, what did you put in, Scott? Can you explain it briefly?
Can I also ask a question? Maybe I apologize. Oh, sorry. Can I go ahead?
Yes.
I'm sorry. So I actually own a short-term rental property in state of Florida, and just can relate to this topic. Don't put all of your eggs in one basket. I just wanted to mention something. So I was looking at the area, for example, up in Pocono Mountains, and there is a fear amongst my peers that zoning changes quite a bit. So, for example, you may buy property that is okay to short-term rent right now, but then, county or township can come in and they just change the zoning, and whatever you invest in it, you bought the furniture, you paid to take all these expensive, beautiful pictures, you did work. Then is there a way, in your opinion, that you can do that protects you from this type of change in the future? So you buy it one way, and then it's basically not allowed.
Yeah, you're touching on. Yeah, I'm getting a little bit of feedback. You're touching on an area that is a great example of why I said, do your homework before you get involved and invest in an area. You're never going to know absolutely, and sometimes you get involved in an area and then all of a sudden they change the regulations. So there's no ironclad way of actually preventing that. But what I do, sometimes the bigger issues are more the HOA regulations than the actual township and the municipality. So first and foremost, if you're looking to buy a place, really go over those HOA regs and make sure there's nothing hidden in there that prevents you from doing that. Sometimes they grandfather in, they say, hey, if there's like 60 places, we'll allow 5 of them or 10 of them to be short-term rentals. So do your homework. But that's one of the reasons I don't invest up in the Poconos, because I'm scared to death of that.
Exactly. And I also wanted to ask you real quick the other question, arbitrage. I was looking at that when you sort of, instead of going ahead and purchasing a property, you get the permission and sublet it, right? But then the issue comes in of the homeowner's insurance. So who assumes so as a short-term rental, I've learned a little bit of a hard way that you need to have a business insurance, because when you have a short-term rental, it's almost like you're running a business. So it's all, you have to have a different type of homeowner insurance. So if I'm renting from someone who's a regular homeowner and I'm trying to sublet it and convert it into a business, almost like a hotel, then how does that go over the property insurance issue?
Yeah, well, that's why I said, and I'm always, above board and open. I'd rather, operate on the side of, in this case, letting, my landlord, know what I plan to do, on the property versus, not telling them and then getting in there and like, oh, you didn't have this in your lease, so I'm allowed to do it type thing. So I would, because there is supplemental insurance that, you can buy to protect you. But at the same point in time, you may need, a sign off or a consent from the landlord who owns the property and or a certificate from him saying, he's got the basic coverage. And now the policy that you're getting is more specific to the short-term rentals and guests staying there and what have you. So I was just erring the side of being straightforward. If the landlord's okay with it, great. If they're not, it's better to know that before you get yourself too far down the path and you can't turn around and go back.
Gotcha. Well, thank you.
Yep.
I don't see any other, let me just see. I don't see any other questions. Scott mentioned to be logged on to Bright and then go to bright.remine.com and it will give you the Air DNA estimated rent. Listen, thank you so much, John. This has been really informative. We appreciate you taking the time and all the effort to create this fantastic presentation. As a reminder, this will be sent to all members most likely by tomorrow, along with the presentation. So thank you for joining us.
Yeah, if you felt it was valuable and you want to do another one where we take, maybe one or two topics and do a deeper dive, I'm open to that as well.
Sure, we'll
Yeah.
talk, definitely.
Yeah,
And
just
then
let me know.
Barb was on, and she's the chair,
Yep.
one of the co-chairs of the education committee. So we'll definitely talk. And check out next month in May, we have a great program coming up on, I think it's called Tech Your Real Estate. What's it called? It's called Tech Up Your Real Estate Game. So that's going to be in May, on May 16th. So look out for that. And thanks for joining us.
Take care. Thanks.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, John.
Yep.